Lynn? Good evening. Good evening. The time is 5:03. The Warwick Finance Committee is now open. May I have a motion for acceptance of the minutes from the committee meeting held on September 7th? I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. PCR 109-22, bid 2023-122, fire apparatus 1500 GPM pumper. Chief? Good evening. Is your microphone on?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Peter McMichael, Fire Chief, Warwick Fire Department. Chairman, the Warwick Fire Department respectfully request to hold this item and the next item as well, the pumper and the rescue vehicle, till next meeting.
Thank you, Chief. So the next meeting would be October 3rd, correct? Per request, may I have a motion per request of the fire department for bid 2023-122 to hold until October 3rd meeting?
Second.
Oh, sorry. May I have a PCR? PCR 111-22. May I have a motion to hold PCR 111-22? I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Per request of the chief, may I have a motion? We will assign bid 2023-121 fire apparatus type 1 ambulance, PCR 112-22. Per request of the chief, may we have this PCR, a motion to hold this PCR until October 3rd? We have the motion. We have the second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bid 2023-066, land lease Winter Avenue Telecommunications Tower. Good evening, Dan.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan Geegan with the Planning Department. The department's recommending awarding this bid. The department's recommending awarding this bid to Cellco Partnership, which is Verizon Wireless. Basically, this bid involves the replacement of the tower at Clegg Field on Winter Avenue. There is an existing tower that's been there since approximately 1998. There was a fire in the tower in May of 2021, and the tower needs to be replaced. T-Mobile is at the site right now. They're interested in being there. However, they did not bid on this particular replacement. Verizon is interested as well, and we believe there's a third carrier. We're looking to relocate the tower to about 400 feet off from its current location, so that's along the tree line and away from the houses that are along Winter Avenue. Verizon's proposing to pay the city $2,000 per month with a 2% annual escalator for a 20-year period. And they're also proposing that we negotiate any co-share for additional tenants on the space. And it's about a 50 by 50 foot area, 2,500 square feet that they would be looking to enter into a ground lease. So this will come back to the council. If it's approved tonight, they'll have to go to the planning board and back to the council for approval for the new the development of the new tower.
Thank you. And this, as in my notes, indicated in the notes, this is a revenue generating that would be over $580,000.
That's
for
a
the
minimum,
life of the
correct.
contract.
Correct.
Yep.
With additional revenue possible through co-location on the tower.
Understood. Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Are there any questions, comments from the council? Any questions, comments from the public? Questions, comments from the public? Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Next is bid 2023-189, remove and splice fiber network connectivity. Wait a minute. Connectivity. That is found on page 19. Oh, that's true. I apologize. So I apologize. So now is the time where we'll go to each individual. So I will call on members of the committee, council, in public. If there is any item of the last two remaining items that they would like to discuss from the bid package, I will start with the committee first. Members of the council, is there any item from the bid package you would like to have discussed? Thank you. Any items from the general public? Calling on the general public, are there any items from the bid package you would like to discuss from the bid package? No, public, yeah, no, that'll be later. Thank you. Hearing none. May I have a motion for PCR 109-22?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. May I have a motion for acceptance of the minutes for the committee meeting held on September 7th, 2022?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. PCR 27-22, formerly bid 2022-333, Flock Automatic License Plate Readers. Council President McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to respectfully request that we hold this item of the purchase of the flock until the October 17th meeting. We have a separate part that's kind of related to this issue in the Ordinance Committee, and I believe it's best that we address that issue first, and then we can, if and when that moves forward, we could discuss purchasing this. So I respectfully request that we hold this item until October 17th. Which
Thank
is
you,
the
Mr.
second
President.
meeting in October.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any discussion from members of the committee? Any discussion from members of the council? Any discussion from members of the public? May I have a motion to hold PCR 27-22 until October 17th?
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you all. PCR 77-22, formerly bid 2022-435, removal fees for solar compacting receptacles. Is there anyone from the department to speak on this? Council President McAllister?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I believe the members of the DPW are looking to hold this item until they have additional information has been requested, and they're not here. So if we could, I respectfully request that you hold this item as well for 2 weeks.
Till the
October 3rd.
October 17th, Mr. President?
Why don't we hold
October
to the October 17th, please? Because I don't know how long. We need some additional information. So let's hold to the 17th, please.
Thank you. So the request is to hold PCR 77-22 till October 17th of this year. Are there any discussion from members of the committee? Any questions, discussion from members of the council? Questions, discussion, members of the public? Hearing none, may I have a motion? Motion to hold. Second. I have a motion, I have a second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. The time is now 5:12 p.m. and the Finance Committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The next committee will be the Ordinance Committee, however, cannot start until 6 p.m. So we will see you back here at 6 p.m.
I like that. It's all, I was just. Oh my gosh. We learned, right?
was changing stuff.
So we have a whole ordinance committee here, so we'll convene ordinance at 6:02 PM. The ordinance committee's first item is acceptance of minutes from the committee meeting held on August 15th, 2022.
Move acceptance.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have PCO 6-22 Sub A, an ordinance regulating the use of automated license plate reader technology, also known as the flock cameras. And we've already had quite a bit of discussion on this. And so before we get into the potential possibility of whether or not anyone wants to amend it, we have members of the public here who undoubtedly wish to speak about it. So if those members of the public wish to approach the mic, we can hear what they have to say before we discuss any potential amendments. Oh, no worries. And feel free, if you don't hear me, you can say speak up. The acoustics in here are very odd.
My name is Kendra Anderson. I live at 174 Wingate Ave here in Warwick. And I'm speaking as someone who's really concerned about the use of advanced surveillance equipment and how fast it's coming to different municipalities without any regulation. And I do acknowledge that they can be useful. They have some good applications and have proved across the country to help with crimes like stolen cars and missing children. So I think that they can be useful, but they are technology that is pretty advanced, and the cameras themselves can photograph many parts of a car as well as inside a car. And there's so much room to use those photographs or the data collected from the license plate readers, as they're called, or advanced, I say, surveillance equipment, that it's sort of the Wild West in our country and here in Rhode Island and now in Warwick. We tried in the state Senate. I'm here on behalf of my district and as Senator Anderson, as well as a resident. We tried to put legislation through. Rep. Solomon and I did that this year. That we worked with the Cranston Police Department. We worked with Colonel Winquist. We worked with the administration and the flock company to come up with legislation that was amenable to everyone. That it wasn't quite where I wanted it to be, but Cranston was in favor of it. Presented it to Judiciary, which we got a really good response. But because of political reasons, it did not get pushed forward in either the House or the Senate. So we don't have regulations statewide. So each municipality is required or responsible for their use of the cameras. And that concerns me. I know that Mayor Pocosi says he trusts the police department. So do I. I think we've got an amazing police department and doing wonderful things for our community. That's not the issue. The issue is not one of trust. It's one of having regulations on the books when something goes wrong. If there is a need for any kind of litigation, if there are no regulations in place, how do we fight something? So we do need at least minimal regulations in place to regulate how long the data is available. Is it indefinitely? Can we use it 10 years forward? How can you access the data? Will every municipality have access to our data? Will the state of Texas have access to our data? As regulations and laws get passed around the country that we don't agree with here in Rhode Island, who's going to have access to our data? How much data or parts of a car can be photographed? That really needs to be set in law as well, or regulations. And what crimes or what uses of the cameras, how can they be used for what crimes? That needs to be specified as well. So, again, as I said, I trust the Warwick Police. This is not a case of not giving them the tools they need. They do need to be able to do their job, but we need to protect civil liberties in Warwick as well as the rest of the state and the rest of our country. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Well, I want to hear from
may
the,
we ask a question of the speaker?
oh, given her role, actually, it makes sense. So yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. And thank you for your conversation here this evening. I have been in constant communication with Rep. Solomon on this issue, and he has also shared with me the legislation both from the House as well as in the Senate. And he indicated to me as recently as today that while it didn't move, let's just put it that way, it didn't move, that everyone was very close to coming to an agreement on dealing with this issue legislatively. He also indicated to me in writing that he intends to redocket this same legislation, the one that was very close to consensus at the very beginning of the General Assembly. Is that also your understanding?
I have not been in touch with him during this time period. As you know, I didn't run for
Right.
re-election.
I know, but you're still serving now.
But yeah, I am, exactly. And I still am a huge advocate and will continue to work on behalf of the legislation, although it didn't go forward. And I will continue after I'm no longer in the Senate, and I hope that someone will passionately take this up in 2023.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, councilors, for your time this evening. My name is Hannah Stern. I'm providing commentary from the ACLU of Rhode Island on the question of passing this ordinance concerning flock safety this evening. Senator Anderson did a very great job of kind of enumerating the many ways that this technology is expansive, the way that its actual capabilities have, I think, been underplayed in a lot of ways. It's an incredibly expansive surveillance technology that is not just limited to license plate readers. It does record, as Senator Anderson noted, these really very small details of a car, and I think it could have a very, a very serious impact on the residential privacy in Warwick. I also know we've come before this council several times in the past few months. We've sent many pages of commentary to everyone in this room, so I don't want to belabor any points, but I do just really want to emphasize, in particular, the insufficiency of this proposed ordinance in regulating or limiting the use of this surveillance technology in really any matter. And that insufficiency of this ordinance is just compounded by the expansiveness and the invasiveness of this system. We think these both just provide a very strong basis for the summary rejection of this program to preserve, again, as Senator Anderson noted, the civil liberties of Warwick residents. Briefly, I just want to note we have provided the council 4 pieces of commentary tonight. One of those is a letter that we sent you in February, which goes into our broad concerns about this technology. One is a letter that we sent in August, just a month ago, on the first iteration of this draft ordinance, for which many of the concerns remain. One is a new piece of commentary, which provides our thoughts on the deficiencies of a draft Warwick Police Department policy on flock that we reviewed. And one letter also provides some insight into the deficiencies of the sub-A version of the ordinance before you this evening. But without going too in the weeds, the bottom line really is that each of these policies and ordinances are far too broad and vague to meaningfully limit the expansive and invasive technology that this council is considering. Neither the policy nor the ordinance protects the privacy of individuals. They do not provide adequate oversight over this technology. The oversight it does provide is flimsy and vague, we think. And we do think that this ordinance and this policy would still facilitate the inappropriate gathering of extreme amounts of data on all individuals who drive by these cameras on a daily basis. And concerningly, neither the ordinance nor the draft policy before you exercises really any true authority over what flock safety itself, as a private entity controlling this technology, controlling all of the data that comes through it, can do with the data. So for example, the assurances that you may receive from this company on data retention and on the use of the data now are not those that you will necessarily receive even in the near future, maybe even in the next month. So I think this should be a very major concern to this council as you consider the use of this technology. Over the past months, the ACLU has provided numerous reasons why we think you should reject this surveillance technology summarily, from the substantial privacy concerns to the broader issue of allowing these massive amounts of data, again, to be funneled into the hands of a private company. We are also deeply committed to public safety. But we have not heard, as the ACLU, a single compelling reason why this technology, why flock safety technology, is the one that has to be used to achieve this important goal. If you reject the use of this technology, you would not be alone in this endeavor. Only a few months ago, Portsmouth actually rejected a similar proposal. They rejected the use of flock safety technology in their city altogether for the reasons that are enumerated in the many pieces of commentary and the many letters that we've sent to this council. We urge strongly that you follow their lead tonight and substantively reject attempts to implement flock safety in Warwick. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Sure.
First, I would like to thank you and the ACLU for providing good commentary and also following up throughout this entire process. I've found it all to be very helpful. I suppose that my main question is, putting aside the concerns more generalized with Flock, and of course any private company that is able to amend its own privacy policies, its own policies in terms of and conditions in general, and otherwise any organization, private, public, I think that we can all recognize that there is no such thing as absolute security. Putting that and those concerns aside for a moment, I'm not sure if there are any cities or towns in Rhode Island or otherwise that I suppose model legislation may not be the right term here, but I suppose any that you would recommend that in the event of the Warwick City Council passing this in some form, a sample of which form you would recommend it take.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question, Counselor. Well, I think that that's kind of a twofold answer. So I think that the the legislation that's been put forward on the state level from Senator Anderson, I think, is a really great blueprint for this. But we have also put forward, there are no municipalities that have put in place a model ordinance that we would recommend. However, we do have language that we would be more than happy to provide this council. East Providence actually put it before their council. There was a lot of interest from the council. It did not go through, but we do have language that we believe would appropriately put in place very specific limitations and guidelines that we think are really important to follow. Those include, again, putting very, very, very narrow permissible uses for the cameras, which this ordinance unfortunately does not do. Neither does the policy that we've seen from the Warwick Police Department. Also putting in place remedies. So if there is inappropriate use of the cameras, making sure that there are ways that people can actually have oversight over that and seek remedies if there is that inappropriate use. So there's no municipality that has passed that so far, but we do have language that we would be more than happy to provide to this council.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Members of the council, hi, my name is Chris Barker. I live at 67 Lincoln Avenue in Warwick. I just want to voice a general opposition to this for much of what these two ladies have said before me. My biggest concerns would be both constitutional and state law potential violations, being the Fourth Amendment and the state laws on privacy. And I would also have grave concerns about the data retention policies and how they would be enforced by the city of Warwick, being that it's a private company, I believe in Georgia, that would be, harvesting, collecting all the data. And also just reportability and who would have access to that data, who would have the legal access, and how all of that would be established.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, members of the council. Do this right. First time reading here, so I'm making a statement here and get myself organized. Give me a minute.
Can you state your name for the record,
Oh, yes.
please?
My name is Russell E. Gunlock Jr. I live at 440 Harrington Avenue in Ward 2. I, who would like to explore both sides of an issue, recently had a good talk with a police officer about the flock cameras, and he assured me the cameras remain mounted in place and equating it to Easy Pass are solely focused on the license plates. That officer added how we give up our privacy once we leave our houses and go out in public. While the officer brought up some good points, I remain unconvinced. Pictures of plates does little to prove who's behind the wheel if the faces are snowed out or focused on just license plates, as my wife Karen suggested during our own discussion. A lot of moving violations are going to get dismissed for a lack of proof. As I have come to terms with Marty at my store, Stop and Shop, where I work, I have noticed a decline in human hiring that has nothing to do with the current industry-wide worker shortage. That money used to make and utilize and maintain Marty could have been better invested in living, breathing personnel. The answer to raising the minimum wage, especially in the food retail industry, is to cut back on payroll by adding more kiosks and self-checkouts. The more we automate, the less humans are needed on the job. I wonder if the police union has considered that possibility. Thank you. Any questions?
Normally, we don't do questions to the public. It was just that one of those individuals happens to be a local representative and the other one happens to be a representative of the ACLU. Of course.
Good evening. My name is Barry Cook, 109 Namcoot Drive. I have 3 points I'd like to make and then read a brief statement. I would like the council to consider several things that I think are worthy of mention. Now, I know there are some cameras that are stationary, and there's some cameras that are mobile. I also understand there's a combination of stationary and mobile cameras in some cities and towns across the country. So in asking the question, I guess I'd like you to consider in the policy that's being made or the ordinance being suggested to spell out how these cameras will be used. Will they be stationary, mounted on telephone poles, posted someplace stationary, like a parking lot? I think it's interesting to know that fact. Also, I've read some stories about these cameras being used in other parts of the country. And another point that I'd like to make is some of the communities that have these cameras are using them in conjunction with automated red light and speed enforcement systems. So I would ask the council, are you considering using these flock cameras or automatic license plate readers in conjunction with automated red light and speed control systems? Thirdly, in some parts of the country, parked cars are also surveilled. So a police officer with a mobile system could ride through the airport, could ride through the Stop and Shop parking lot, could ride through the City Hall parking lot and surveil parked cars. So my question would be, what is the intent? Will the ordinance prohibit using them with automated red light systems, automated speed control systems? Will they be a combination fixed and mobile? And will parked cars also be surveilled? I'd like to read a brief statement. I have more to offer, but I learned tonight from Councilman Ricks that there was a policy recently approved by the Warwick Board of Safety. I haven't read that yet. I'm not familiar with it, but just some points. Many people, including myself, think that these cameras are certainly an invasion of privacy. As I understand they're used throughout the country, and I'm not sure about Warwick, but they also can take pictures of people in the cars, not only the operator, but a passenger. If our intent is to surveil license plates, then I think any policy has to say they're not to be taking pictures of drivers or passengers. That is happening throughout the country. The data collected from these systems is vast, and in my opinion, as well as others, overreaching. So I think it's clear that we need to know what the policy and the goal is for implementing this system in Warwick. Perhaps the policy that was recently passed spells that out, I don't know. Also throughout the country, there are incidents of abuse, not only by law enforcement agencies, but also individual law enforcement officers. For an example, there are several cases where an individual police officer has decided that he or she wants to track an individual license plate. For whatever reason, I don't know, but they want to track an individual license plate. In one instance that I recently read, a female police officer in another state learned after she left the police department that there had been 492 inquiries of her license plate and her driver's license information. So we don't want to be overreaching here. I know, again, as Councilman Ricks told me, that there's a policy having been issued. I'll take the time to find that and read it. But it's important to say that a well-developed mission statement should be prepared, laying out exactly what the purpose of this technology of automated license plate readers is. What is our mission statement? What is our goal? What is our aim? There must be a comprehensive policy statement as to how long the data will be stored, a policy statement laying out who has access to this material, and it should be on a limited basis. Record keeping, how long will the information be kept? Who will be in charge of the information? There should be access logs. Anytime an individual or an agency accesses this information, there should be a record of it. It must be the policy of the city administration that no database information will be sold. The collected data must not be shared with any private party or non-law enforcement agencies or companies. There is much more to be discussed, but I'm not prepared to go any further. I will come back at a later date after I've read the policy put out by the Board of Public Safety. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak from members of the public? All right, well, seeing none, we can move on to discussion amongst the council. And full disclosure on my end, my goal for this evening is to make sure this goes to the full council for discussion and any amendments that might be desired, as opposed to hashing it out in committee, because as we all remember from last time when we attempted to do that, it was very hectic and it got confusing and difficult for everyone to follow. And it really didn't do anyone any favors. So having it to the full council means everyone can all equally participate rather than the kind of wonky structure that is the committee process. And it can also make sure we have the time and energy necessary to properly consider amendments. That being said, it doesn't stop us from discussing the ordinance now. So is there any member of the committee that wishes to speak regarding the proposed ordinance? Councilman Ricks.
Thank you, Chairman. First, if I may, I would have a question for the Chief of Police. Good evening, Colonel. A question for clarification. I emailed you earlier this afternoon. I apologize for giving you short notice on this. I noticed in the general order from the Board of Public Safety in Article 8, Section A, there's a reference to data will be transferred from vehicles to the designated storage in accordance with department procedures. It was previously my understanding that the flock cameras would be mounted stationary. So I wanted to get clarification on whether there would be any ALPR cameras in motor vehicles.
There will not be. All the cameras that we intend on purchasing will be stationary, affixed to poles. That section in the policy refers to any instance where an officer may access a flock system from their laptop computer in the vehicle. But we will not be having moving radar. Moving ALPR technology.
That makes sense. Thank you. Let's see. While I have the floor, I'll make some more general comments. So we as a city council have heard from the public, not just tonight, but from seeing members of the public come on previous occasions where this has been scheduled to be heard. It seems that of the members of the public who are attending meetings, there are a lot of reservations, if not outright opposition to moving forward with this. I've similarly heard a lot of opposition when speaking with constituents as I knock on doors, and if the issue comes up, as well as at the Norwood Neighborhood Association, where members approached me after the meeting, and we had phone and email conversations afterwards. That's not to say that I don't believe that this, once the ordinance is more fully amended, I'm not opposed to having an up or down vote. However, I do think that we need to have that final product posted, visible to the public after amendments have been proposed and passed, so that the public sees the option of here is the best version that we can come up with, and give that version an up or down vote. So to get into some of my more specific concerns, and these are independent from the latest correspondence from the ACLU. I think that the ACLU commentary has added a lot, so I don't mean to skip over anything listed in there as well, and I would eagerly await any model legislation that we received from that organization who has been doing a lot of work on this subject. So with those caveats, the potential issues that I have with the policy issued by the Board of Public Safety, and as I had expressed to the chief in an email earlier today, are as follows. First, in Article 2, titled Policy, Section B has a list of, quote, official law enforcement purposes, quote, for the data, but then has a separate sentence which states, quote, it may also be used to gather information related to active warrants, homeland security, electronic surveillance, suspect interdiction, stolen property recovery, and active criminal investigations. I'm concerned about the inclusion of the phrase electronic surveillance if not part of work relating to an active warrant or to suspect interdiction or part of an active criminal investigation. I'm not sure exactly what the phrase electronic surveillance would mean in that context without any caveats. And I understand that there is just general policy, not a matter of getting into the specifics of the do's and don'ts. It's more of a mission statement, if you will. However, I do think that needs to be refined for clarity to the public, and also because I think that once we get into those specifics, it can be helpful to refer back to that policy as stated in Article 2. Second item, and several items having to do with Article 8. So item 2 on my list is Article 8, Section A, referring to data will be transferred from vehicles. I believe that the Colonel addressed that, but I think that the language could use a little bit of clarification just so that the public is clear on it and so that it isn't later misinterpreted as data going one way, not the other way. Item 3 on my list, Article 8, Section B, still includes the phrase, quote, civil action, or is subject to a discovery request or other lawful action to produce records, quote. Either the phrase, quote, civil action, quote, or the phrase, quote, discovery request or other lawful action to produce records, quote, could open up the scope beyond that of ALPR data that has become or that the department reasonably believes may become evidence in a criminal action. I understand that there are other provisions that expressly prohibit the release of ALPR data, including in Article 11, but having a seeming contradiction in Article 8 may create enough ambiguity for abuse or unintended consequences. Item 4 on my list, Article 8, Section D uses the phrase, quote, public safety purposes, quote, which could be interpreted very broadly. I'll skip over some of the details on that. 5, similarly, quote, ALPR data, quote, and that's a phrase that's used throughout this document. The phrase ALPR data is not defined in the definitions section. Without a definition of ALPR data or distinguishing between types of ALPR data, the scope of what may be released pursuant to Article 11, quote, releasing ALPR data, quote, is ambiguous. I can understand the hesitation to have hard and fast rules that take away the discretion of the chief or the chief's authorized designees. However, at least having some guidelines on the scope of the ALPR data that may be released would be helpful for transparency. It would also be helpful as a guardrail here. Continuing on to Article 11, releasing of ALPR data. Item 6 on my list is list of concerns is the phrase, quote, as otherwise permitted by law, quote, at the end of the sentence, quote, the ALPR data may be shared only with other law enforcement or prosecutorial agencies for official law enforcement purposes or as otherwise permitted by law. may tend to open the door to use in civil actions and the like, as the civil actions are, quote, otherwise permitted by law, quote. Perhaps it could be changed so that, and I'll spare you the weeds, but changed so that it's more specific, that we're not looking to allow for this to be used in civil actions. We're not looking for this to be allowed for motor vehicle code enforcement. These are all items that I think that we all agree on. The chief has expressed that we're not looking to use these ALPR cameras for motor code enforcement or allowing them to be used for civil actions. But when it comes to these policies, I really want to see that spelled out at every single step so that we're certain, as much as we possibly can be, that that doesn't happen.
You have 30 seconds left.
Item 7, Article 11 is unclear on whether, quote, ALPR data, quote, that may be shared in general as a matter of course, would include everything that was captured by flock cameras, including, for example, raw images and metadata, or if it would be more limited, unless the requesting law enforcement agency specifically requested ALPR data that includes raw images and metadata. For example, could there be a request for all ALPR data from a particular camera for 30 days? I feel that that kind of data could be easily abused when shared.
Councilman Ricks, your time is up. Do any other members of the council wish to speak on this? Councilman Foley.
Question for the chief. Upon getting notified that the Public Safety Committee had developed guidelines and a policy, specific to that policy, that was not written in a vacuum, correct?
No, it wasn't.
You had input from various solicitors, lawyers, attorneys.
Other chiefs of police, correct. We modeled our policy off the Cranston policy.
And as of today, that you know of, there is no legal court challenge from the ACLU or any other entity challenging those regulations.
None to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Do any other members of the council wish to speak? Councilman Lattiser?
Thank you, Chairman. So my understanding from your opening comments is that you're looking to move this to the floor for full discussion on the floor?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll reserve my comments till then and questions. Thank you.
Alrighty. And I know other members of the public have come in since we started. So if any of the new arrivals wish to comment or speak on the flock cameras, please feel free to step forward to the mic. And while we wait for that possibility, any other members of the council that wish to speak on this? All right, seeing none and seeing no movement amongst the general public, I'd like to move this to the floor for discussion, or move this to the full council for discussion and any amendments. So consider that a motion. A motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And that concludes Ordinance Committee at 6:40 p.m.
Thank you, Chairman Sinapi. Just to recap, we're going to move this, the committee has recommended to move to the full council for discussion, so that will start at 7 o'clock at the full council meeting. Next up is the Public Safety Committee, and that can start when the committee is ready. Thank you.
Good evening. Public safety is called to order at 6:41. First item is the acceptance of minutes from committee meeting held on September 7th. Do we have a motion?
Move favorable action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. First item, PCR 95-22, a resolution in regards to erecting stop signs at the intersection of Boca Street and Cumberland Road. Council President McAllister.
Thank you, Chairman. I had a traffic study on this done. It was recommended by the police department. We did have one constituent who had reached out to me last month regarding this. I did have the police department reach out to her to get her concerns. I do support this. I do support the traffic division's recommendation. The traffic study was there for this. There is a daycare at the bottom of the hill, and it's kind of one way in, one way out in that community, in that neighborhood there, especially in that one area there. So I agree with the traffic study that was conducted, and I have talked to a number of individuals in that neighborhood that support this as well. So I respectfully request favorable action on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the committee? Any council comments from the council? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Move favorable action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The committee closes at 6:43.
And thank you, Chairman Foley. The next committee is the Intergovernmental Committee, and that can start when the committee is ready as well. Thank you.
Are you in charge of this?
It is now 6:44 and the Intergovernmental Committee is now in session. The first order of business is acceptance of the minutes from the committee meeting held on September 7th, 2022. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to accept.
I can't second because I was absent.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
The next order of business is PCR 104-22, a resolution to the Rhode Island Department of Transportation and the State Traffic Commission to perform a traffic study at the intersection of Centerville Road and Cedar Pond Drive. Councilman Sinapi?
So first off, this is a great example of if you're a member of the general public and there's an issue that's been around forever and you think there's nothing anybody can do about it and you don't bother to ask, you really should ask. I used to actually live over here, and I was of the opinion that nothing could be done about it because it's been forever. Right outside Royal Crest Apartments, right on Centerville Road, very busy intersection, and there were regularly accidents there, but people just kind of accepted it. But one constituent called in and asked for a traffic study, just like anyone else can. And I told her at the time I was skeptical because of the street and how busy it already is and the unlikelihood of what she wanted to get being a recommendation, which is a traffic light. Lo and behold, when the officer did the study, that intersection is terrible, to put it gently, as far as for accident rates. For the comparable intersections that do have lights, there was roughly, I think, like 30 accidents over the period of time that was looked into, whereas this intersection had over 100 and change. So it was drastically different. So hopefully the state looks at that and agrees, and they can get something done. As those who recall, usually when it's a state issue, we have to ask them to do a traffic study as opposed to just implementing the recommendation of the Warwick officer. But they did finally implement the study recommendations for Greenwich and Main Ave and East Ave. So hopefully this one eventually will get done as well. So I request favorable action.
Any questions from the committee?
Any questions from the council? Any questions from the public? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
I move favorable action.
Second.
Having a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is now 6:47 and the Intergovernmental Committee has adjourned.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That is it for committees this evening. The full city council meeting will start at 7 p.m. We do have public comment this evening, and there is a sign-up sheet on the podium there. So you feel free to sign up if you would like to speak on any topic related to Warwick. That will be at the start of the council meeting as well. And we will see everybody at 7 p.m. Thank you.
I did nothing. The chair was switched. I don't know if it's broken. I could get two chairs. I'm back. I'm here. It is. I figured things to worry about. I was doing my meeting. I squeak, 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 squeak. I can hear the bag crinkling. Don't apologize. I was on the meeting. That was squeak, squeak, squeak. But I got the chair. So his attitude was, I'll just give it to Tim. No, I would never do that to you. I would never do that to you. You better. You can borrow my pen. Go ahead. I don't even.
Thank you very much. You will definitely get a much better Christmas present this year.
I'm done with it. That's all right. Look how far back it goes, though. It's like a recliner, but my legs are gonna go.
Joe hasn't told me. Yes. Why don't you switch chairs?
Yeah, he was trying that. He was spinning it as I was in the committee and all it was spin. I asked you for one favor and you quit. I'm getting, I stayed with you, I asked you. The next week you quit. Congratulations.
Good evening, everyone. I call the September 19th, 2022 City Council meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Yeah.
Here.
Thank you. Councilwoman Travis, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the balls bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening, everyone. First off is General Communications. I'd like to pause on that for a second and introduce our special guest, if we have no objections from the council on that. All right, Councilman McElroy.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a resolution of congratulations. Whereas Deputy Police Chief Mark Alucci is retiring from the Warwick Police Department and is being awarded this recognition as a testimonial of loyal and dedicated service for the past 22 years. And whereas Deputy Alucci and his wife Sylvia raised 2 daughters in Warwick before moving to Blackstone, Mass. And whereas Deputy Alucci was sworn in on November 27th, 2001, moving through the ranks and being sworn in as the Deputy Chief on March 12th, 2019. And whereas Deputy Alucci earned his associate degree in law enforcement from the Community College of Rhode Island in 1998 and his bachelor's from Rhode Island College in 2000. And whereas Deputy Alucci has served as a member of the SWAT team and has served as the team leader for the past 3 years. He also served as a member of the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve and was called to serve in Iraq in 2007. And whereas during a long and distinguished career in public service, Deputy Alucci has accumulated an impressive list of awards and citations for public service, civic and professional achievements, and whereas he will be missed both professionally and as a friend, and we extend our very best wishes for his continued success in his life's pursuits. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the mayor and the Warwick City Council urge our citizens to join with us as we extend our sincere appreciation for his work and wish him well in his future endeavors.
Thank you, Councilman. Commander, if we can have you just stand up here. I just want to say a few words, and I know we all want to congratulate you and shake your hand. I just want to thank you. Take this opportunity to thank you. Thank you for your service to the city of Warwick over 20 years, and also to your service to our country. True leadership and true passion to serve our country and our community. Being a police officer in this day and age is really difficult, and you did it with honor. You were a great representative of the city of Warwick when you were out there every single day. I also want to thank your family. I know there was probably a lot of long nights where you're out and they're at home and life goes on. So someone's got to take care of the business. So I just want to thank your family as well. Commander, we just wish the best for you in the future. You have big shoes to fill here in the police department, but also big shoes to fill for the next MC at all the promotional ceremonies. You did an excellent job as the MC, and big shoes to fill there. And I may have already mentioned to, I think you had a lieutenant that did it last Thursday, just right before he went up there, just to make him sweat a little bit. So I personally thank you for all the times that you reached out to me and supported our city, and thank you very much. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you and your family. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does any other council people? Councilman Latta, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. So, Commander, while it's a sad day for us, of course, to see you retire, and for all our citizens here in the city of Warwick, I do want to say it's been a pleasure working with you. I know that sometimes, well, maybe most of the time, I ask some pretty difficult questions. We all know I dig in deep on the issues, particularly the numbers. But on the very few occasions that perhaps we had a difference of opinion, that's what it was. It was a difference of opinion. And we moved on. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for you in all the respect that you have always shown this city council, even when we may have some disagreements. I don't know how the commander draws the short straw to come before this council, but nonetheless, you did so very respectfully, and I certainly appreciate having to have this opportunity to work with you, and I wish you all the best, and also to your family. It's not easy for a family whose spouse is in the profession that you're in, and kudos to them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Travis.
Okay. I also want to add to it that I have nothing but the highest respect for you. My whole family does. And we're sadly going to miss you, that's for sure. But I wish you nothing but the best in your new endeavor. And you and your family, I'm sure everything will be fine, knowing that you're at the head of it, because all you do is great things. So I wish you the best, and I'll miss you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
And Commander, do you have anything to say? That you don't have to, but to put you on the spot.
Do I have to fill out the sign-in sheet, sir?
You do not have to fill out the sign sheet, but if you want to come back for public comment, that is after this, so you will have to sign up then. So.
Received. I know we're on a time crunch, so I kept my comments limited to just under an hour. No, I want to thank everyone here. I want to thank my mother and my father and my wife, my daughter, and Colonel Connor, and the other representatives of the city, all of you folks, the council, the city council, and the council president. I apologize. It's certainly more emotional than I thought it would be. Normally, it's no problem coming up to the microphone, but knowing it might be one of the last times is certainly moving. I'm grateful for everything that all the citizens
of Warwick have given me throughout the years and the support that they've given to the police department, it is second to none. It made coming to work an absolute privilege. I can tell you in my role in working with the colonel, the staff, the past mayor, Mayor Picozzi, Mayor Avedisian, that we truly have the best law enforcement agency, I believe, in this country and in this world, and I would put our officers up against any challenge that were to come our way. And I know I'm saying something that all of you already know. And I know with that, there'll always be someone to fill the role. Even if someone can never be replaced, someone will always be there to fill the role. Warwick will always be near and dear to my heart. This is where my oldest daughter was born, at Kent Hospital. And this is where I walked up the steps by myself with some trepidation as I went to file a marriage certificate with my wife, not someone else. But it is all the memories here that I didn't think would go by so fast. And it is working with all of you that have made this truly special, and all the citizens. And I'm grateful that regardless of the path anyone takes in achieving an accomplishment or a goal, the goal never changes. And that's what I most admire about this council and the way that this government comports itself. I hope to take the lessons that I've learned, that you've taught me, to the next step in Somerset. And I'm very grateful that I have all of you to thank and reach out to if you're still answering the phone the next time I call. Thank you very much for everything. Thank you, all of you.
Congratulations. Good luck, Chief. Good luck.
We are now still under general communications. This is for announcements of congratulations, condolences, and community events. We, as a council, I have one that's actually both a condolence first and then a congratulations. I would like to point out our Sergeant of Arms, Paul Wells. Him and his family had a loss a couple weeks ago. K9 Fox passed away. K9 Fox worked with Paul. Paul is a retired Warwick police officer, and Fox was a police dog, and he served the city of Warwick. He assisted in a number of things. I read a whole report on him and the drugs that he took off the streets, and the work that he did with Paul and the police department to protect our residents should not go unsaid. So I respectfully request that we have a moment of silence for not only for K9 Fox, but also for Paul and his family, who Fox was a pet to them, not only a partner but a pet for him and his family and his kids. So if we can have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. On a lighter note, I would also like to point out that this is the 1-year anniversary that Paul has been our Sergeant of Arms here for the City Council. So I just want to thank Paul. Paul is a volunteer. He comes here. Again, he's a retired Warwick police officer. He comes to the council meetings. He is our person out there that can answer questions for residents while the meeting is going on. He turns the mic on for everybody. He is just an added part of the meeting that this council wanted to do, to have somebody represent the council out there. We're at our desks, we're working in the committees and stuff like that, and a lot of times people just have a quick question, and so Paul is here. So I just want to thank him. I can't believe it's been a year already, and he keeps coming back, and we appreciate that. So thank you very much, Sergeant. I would also like to make mention that September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And this entire city council was a sponsor of a proclamation recognizing childhood cancer awareness. So I just want to point that out, that this is an important issue. And, you know, if you can support local and federal institutions that are working on addressing childhood cancer, that is great, and we just wanted to highlight that. That's very important. So this resolution was signed by the mayor and the entire city council. And I believe that is all I have for under general communications. Do other members of the council have anything? Councilman Gephardt.
Thank you. I wanted to give recognition over the last year or so. Some neighbors in Coesit came together to form somewhat of a neighborhood association, and what came out of that is a block party, which had been happening for a few years, but this year it really expanded and took on new life. We had a bunch of volunteers. We had almost 300 attendees. It was a family-friendly event, and it went off without a hitch. So I want to give recognition to all the volunteers that helped put that together, and looking forward to doing it again next year. Thank you.
Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. So just to segue off of your announcement on the cancer awareness this month, one of my constituents reached out to me a week or so ago and asked to be able to do a fundraiser for that very cause at my office building at 1065 Warwick Avenue. And we will be doing that. It'll be from, I believe, 11 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. I'm not going to tell you all what time I'm going to be there, because I don't want any of you trying to catch me with the hose, but I will be there at some point. So hopefully a lot of folks will show up for that. I also want to take a minute to thank our very own council liaison, Joanne Canoyer, as well as all of our staff that worked so diligently and so hard to get everyone moved over to the Sawtooth building. That was a pretty significant undertaking, you know, for folks that weren't in the moving business, and still had to keep up with all their daily routine and their responsibilities. And I think it went along very well. And certainly, I'm sure everyone here appreciates that. But I think it's important that they're all acknowledged and thanked for their efforts in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilman, what's the date of that fundraiser?
September. It's this Sunday.
This Sunday.
This coming Sunday. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councilwoman Travis.
Yes, on Saturday, September 24th, at City Park, we're going to have the rally for recovery that we have in the jail. So that's something, if you'd like to stop by and hear some of those stories, it's really very interesting. And there'll be a lot of things.
Rally for recovery on Sunday. Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was looking for the Sergeant of Arms, Paul Wells, but I'm going to stand because for some reason my my chair shrunk, and we can't figure out why. But I wanted for two parts. I wanted to say to Officer Wells that Sergeant Wells, I apologize, that it was. I thank you so much for the personal notification of Fox. When I first got elected to the council, and before that, I actually knew Sergeant Wells. Our wives worked together, and there's nothing more intimidating, Mr. President, than going to spend an evening or go when I go pick up my friend to go hang with my friend, where the whole house rattles because Fox was downstairs and he just wanted to know who was in the house, to the point where I would have to go to the door and talk calmly, and that still didn't calm him down. Fox was always on duty. Fox was always alert, and the amount of times, the amount of drugs he took off the street, as you said, Mr. President, the amount of lives he probably saved from that simple scent of his, or finding the object that they need, or finding any type of, whether it be an illegal weapon that he was able to find for the police department. His years of service to the city it cannot be matched. I do not understand, and we're very fortunate that we have a police force with a great trained K-9 unit, and that we also correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that we also loan out our services, if you will, in the K-9 force that we have. They put on some great displays. They're wonderful with the community, and they do a great job, and Fox was definitely no different. It's a great loss. To go on to that, to another subject, thank you so much for stepping up. When we asked, the president challenged us when he first was selected as the council president to do something to make this council chambers more welcoming to our citizens. And one of the first things that was brought up was, how about a sergeant at arms? Someone, as the president said, well, we're in committees and discuss, and I can't tell you how many times when I sat in the audience and now here, where people would come up and they'd say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just wondering, where am I? Where are we going? When's this coming up? And I know in the past, meetings would run very late, and the citizens were very confused and then therefore frustrated. With Paul doing this position, people have someone they can go to, a point of contact to explain the process, and also to guide them and lead them and kind of get the order going. So I want to thank you for the last year of you stepping up and, quite honestly, volunteering to guide this council and still give service to your city. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman Howe. Councilman Foley.
Yes, on another solemn note, before the council meeting started tonight, I noticed on Facebook there was a notice. Andy Sullivan, another Warwick police officer, his father passed away. So I would like a moment of silence in recognition of that.
Certainly. Can we have a moment of silence, please? Thank you. Anything else for general communications from members of the council? Okay, next up is executive communications. There are none. A is acceptance of the minutes for the council meeting held on September 7th. Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Councilman Sinapi? Sinapi abstains. Thank you. The minutes have been accepted. Next up is public comment, Rule 41. Again, if anybody would like to speak, there is a sign-up sheet here, last call for that. Rule 41, after the general communications and prior to the consent calendar at each city council public hearing meeting, there shall be a 15-minute period which citizens may comment about Warwick City government issues subject to the following stipulations. The total period of time for public comment shall be 15 minutes. Comments need to be brief in order to allow as many citizens as possible to participate. The topics for comment shall be issues directly affecting city government. City council members will not respond to questions during the public comment period. Public comment session will terminate at the expiration of 15 minutes. Waiver of this provision requires unanimous consent. Is there anyone signed up at this time? There's no one. Okay. Last call. We'll do one more public comment. All right. Thank you, Sergeant. We're now moving to number 1, which is the consent calendar. PCR 109-22, resolution relative to bids. Committee report, Finance.
Favorable action?
For action, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley. Go ahead, Councilman Howe.
Bid 2023-189, remove and splice fiber network connectivity. Bid 2023-199, Sophos firewall services renewal. That concludes consent calendar of bids, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from members of the council that were not asked earlier this evening in the Finance Committee? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks? Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. Councilman Howe, I believe a few items have been removed.
Mr. President, I fear that I made a minor error. There was one other bid that I didn't read for the record.
Go ahead.
I do apologize. That would be bid 2023-066, land lease Winter Avenue Telecommunications Tower.
Solicitor Walsh.
It did remain as part of the bid package. Is there any necessity for a motion of reconsideration by any member of the council, or is everyone comfortable with their vote being applied as a yes vote as part of that? Okay to proceed.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. I do apologize.
Yep. And Councilman Howe, I believe 2 items have been removed from the consent calendar.
Yes, Mr. President. Bid formerly, PCR 111-22, formerly bid 2023-122 fire apparatus has been hold until October 3rd.
Hold to October 3rd.
Formerly bid 2023-121 fire apparatus type 1 ambulance, now PCR 112-22, hold until October 3rd.
Hold to October 3rd. Thank you very much, Councilman.
Thank you.
We are now moving to unfinished business on the agenda. First up is PCO 6-22 Sub A, an ordinance relating to the use of automatic license plate reader technology. Committee report, ordinance. Okay, can we get a move and we'll get a second and then we can have a discussion? I'll take that as a favorable action. And second by Councilman Howe. Okay, are there members of the council that have any questions or comments on this item? Councilman Ricks.
I have a lengthy amendment that I can introduce at this time. So let's see. The amendment, and I'm looking at the Sub A version that is in our binders and was distributed for this meeting. That's the one with the green highlighting. So this would be an amendment to the Sub A, just to make sure that everyone is looking at the correct version. First, at the end of subsection B, I would continue the sentence, add a new sentence at the end of subsection B, stating, quote, any policy or changes thereto must be ratified by the city council in order to take effect. Subsection D, I have some changes. I'm leaving the all of the language intact, though I'm adding to the end of the first sentence and then picking up after the green text. So I'll just read the entirety of subsection D, the amended version that I intend to introduce for clarity. So it would read, data collected by an ALPR technology system shall not be sold or shared with any third-party individuals or entities, excluding law enforcement agencies that similarly have policies prohibiting the sale or sharing of any such data with any third-party individuals or entities, excluding law enforcement agencies with similar policies. Such data should be stored for no longer than 30 days and in accordance with the established Rhode Island records retention schedule. Thereafter, ALPR data shall be purged unless it has become, or it is reasonable to believe it will become, evidence in a criminal action. Data detection and browsing activity is exempt from the storage and purging requirements of this subsection. In the event that any law enforcement agency does sell or share any such data in violation of this subsection, the department shall demand that such law enforcement agency delete any such data provided by the department, take all reasonably necessary measures to delete all such copies, and demand disgorgement of all proceeds of or flowing from any sale to be directed to the city. All copies of such data referred to in this subsection shall be deleted within 30 days, except pursuant to policies adopted in accordance with the provisions of this subsection. With the provisions of this section. Moving on, I would add sub-items to subsection E. E7, any instances of erroneous identification by the ALPR technology system. E8, the location at which any stationary or fixed ALPR that is actively collecting data is installed and used. So those two items are metrics that would be included as part of the transparency portal. Next, subsection F. A law enforcement officer shall be certified in ALPR operations by the department prior to operating or accessing ALPR data or ALPR technology systems. New subsection G. Any data or other information created or collected in contravention of this chapter, and any data or information derived therefrom, shall be immediately deleted and destroyed, and may not be offered as evidence by any municipal entity in any criminal or civil action or proceeding, except as evidence of the violation of this chapter, or be voluntarily provided to another person or entity for use as evidence for any other purpose. Let's see. In the event of a violation of the collection or use of ALPR data inconsistent with this section. That's basically language taken from the state version that has not yet passed, but was being considered. So that would be, and we may need to further discuss the remedies and penalties on that. Finally, the last subsection that I would add would be subsection H. Prior to any ALPR data being shared with any other law enforcement agency or any third party, such recipient shall provide a written affirmation that it shall use and dispose of any such ALPR data transmitted from the department in accordance with this section and department policies.
Thank you, Councilman. So that is, amendment has been made. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Lattiser and Councilman Gephardt. Okay, I will give my comments and then open it up to my colleagues on, we're just talking about this amendment at this time. I really appreciate Councilman Ricks's work on this. I know this is a very important issue to him, and he's done obviously a lot of work on this. With that said, however, I will not be supporting this amendment this evening. I believe that we're talking about two different things here. The city council's role is not to create a policy for the police department, and that is the Board of Public Safety. I believe that our power lies in the purse, meaning we will be able to decide if the city council wants to approve buying these cameras when that comes up to us. I wanted to see a policy. The Board of Public Safety has provided a policy. I have read through the policy. I don't think any policy is going to be perfect. I don't think any policy is going to satisfy everybody. I just don't believe it is the council's role to write a policy for the police department, not for flock, not for any other issues. It is separation of powers. I appreciate the work that is going into this, but the Board of Public Safety has a policy in place. A lot of the questions that were asked earlier this evening from members of the public are already answered in that policy. How long they can keep it for, who has control of it, how they're going to do it. That was passed by the Board of Public Safety. I don't think an ordinance from the city council should get into rewriting a policy for the police department. I just personally do not feel that is our role. So I will not I will not be supporting this amendment this evening. I think our ultimate power on the council will come up at another time when it was held for a couple of weeks, when the question comes before us, are we going to buy these? And I believe if council members do not agree with the policy that is in place, it is 100% their priority to vote against purchasing them. And I think that's where our authority is as a council. It is not writing policies for the police department. So again, I appreciate all the work that you put into this. Councilman Ricks, I cannot support your amendment at this time. Thank you. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I would also like to thank Councilman Sinapi for all of the work that he put into the original document we have in front of us. I know that it's very time consuming. I also have spent a lot of time going through all the documents, both from the police department as well as the ACLU, as well as a significant amount of communications I've received from members of the public. And also thanking Councilman Ricks for his efforts. I do have a question. And this is something that, listening to how many times this evening policy was referred to, it brings me to this question. And this question is for the solicitor. Does policy established by the police department or has been talked about this evening from the Board of Public Safety, does that policy trump, overrule, replace, or take the place of any ordinance that this city council may pass?
Thank you, Councilman. Our ordinances take priority over departmental or executive policies.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So no policy, whether it's the police department, fire department, DPW, or anyone, will trump or replace an ordinance passed by the city council, any city council, whether it be those of us sitting here now or new.
We are governed by a certain hierarchy in this body. For the purposes of local government, our charter takes precedence over anything else that the municipality has authority over, followed by those items that are prescribed in our ordinances, followed by policies.
Thank you. So over the years that I've been sitting on the city council, there has been numerous times.
Excuse me, Councilman, we just remember this is just on this amendment.
I
right now.
understand. This is
Okay.
speaking directly to this amendment where in item 3 on authority, it speaks to Rhode Island general law. So over the years, it has been stated on this council floor, sometimes perhaps on legislation that I was pursuing or others, that there is legislation in the General Assembly that is pending to address that particular issue. And we need to wait, or we should wait, until the General Assembly makes the ruling and passes a state law. Well, we heard this evening, and I have a copy of Senate Bill 2650, as well as House Bill 7507, that was in the General Assembly this past session. Senate Bill 2650 is the one that Senator Anderson testified to earlier that had come very, very close to a consensus. And I have spoken at length to Representative Solomon about this as well. And he is fully intending to reintroduce 2650 again at the beginning of the legislative session. So with that said, to me, it would make sense for us to kind of take a step back on this, in addition to all of the other concerns that we have received, that we've heard, items from our, well, I won't speak for any of you, but from my constituents, and take a step back and let's see what the General Assembly does. Let's see what they propose and pass, if anything, as a state law governing these flock cameras and what they can do and they can't do. If you had gotten a copy of that legislation, many of the concerns that were addressed this evening or questions that were asked this evening are addressed in that legislation. And as we know, state law trumps it all. So to enact something now as the legislative branch of government on a local level, hearing, and I'm not going to say knowing, I'll say hearing that the representative from the city of Warwick intends to reintroduce legislation to address the questions and concerns with this particular pending item. I think that it makes sense that we just take a step back, let it go to the General Assembly, and let's see how the General Assembly responds to it, as opposed to doing something now that is just going to be an act of what we think is due diligence to be trumped and overruled by state law, rather than letting state law guide and govern the use or not use of these flock cameras. So, having said that, I would like to propose or make a motion, I should say, for the city council to take a step back and allow the state to continue doing their due diligence regarding the flock cameras, and when they render their opinions, use that as our guide on the local level. So that would be a motion I would like to make at this time.
All right, we're just going to go to the solicitor because we do have a motion that was seconded just for on protocol.
I'll defer to Councilman Lattiser's motion and allow his motion and discussion to take priority over mine.
Okay, so we are on a pending motion to amend that has been seconded properly, and we've been in discussion. Councilman Lattiser is offering an intervening amendment to hold the item to a date certain, postpone. I need clarification as to your intention as it relates to the procedural motion.
Okay, good, good question, Solicitor. I would certainly be amenable to putting in a hold until. That certainly would be something that we could amend, extend, or withdraw should legislation be passed. Knowing how things move in the General Assembly, I would propose on a date certain of April 1st to have a date out there. It certainly is something that if we learn in May, and I'm sure we'll all be keeping an eye on that, if we learn in March that it's going to take a little bit more time to maneuver through, we can always move to amend or extend. If someone is more comfortable with putting it into the end of the legislative session, that's fine with me as well.
Well, it's your motion, so please provide some time
Okay,
frame.
let's do with a sunset of June 1st.
So there's an intervening procedural motion here to hold the item until what we can say is the first meeting in June, which would be June 5th. These are okay. So we would need a second on that motion.
We have a second? Second by Councilman Ricks. All right, so the motion that is now being discussed is to hold until
To hold
June.
the item that exists before us, PCO 622 sub A, a motion to hold until June 5th of 2023 has been made and seconded.
Any questions on that amendment? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll to hold.
Mr. McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley? No. Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? No. 2 yes, 7 no, motion fails.
Motion fails to hold. Are there any additional amendments?
So we are
solicitor?
back on the, we are back on the Councilman Ricks amendment.
Okay, so we're back on Councilman Ricks' amendment. Are there any questions on Councilman Ricks' amendment? Councilman Gephardt.
So, thank you, Council President. So, on Councilman Ricks' amendment, did not take issue with. However, the one that I'm stuck on is requiring a policy, a departmental policy that already has a governing body to then forward that policy for ratification back to the city council. I think that's a bridge too far for me. So I would not support that particular amendment. I do think the addition of the location of the cameras to the transparency portal is a good one. I had a couple marked down here with some overlap that I was going to introduce as well. I need a run back on the other components, but as it stands right now, the amendment I would not support simply based on that first component around requiring the Board of Public Safety to gain approval from the City Council on any adjustments to that policy.
I'll remove that portion. So That would be removing the amendment
Yeah,
to
you need to be
subsection B.
recognized. Hold on one second. Any additional comments, Councilman? Okay. Councilman Rex.
Motion amended to remove the change to subsection B.
Second by Councilman Lattiser. Okay. Solicitor Walsh.
First off, Councilman Ricks, you read a lengthy amount of amendments into the record that I was unable to keep up with. Do you have that at your avail to be able to submit to me either in written or electronic form so that I can clarify any potential changes to the amendment that you've already proffered?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I have that?
Mr. President, request a 10-minute recess while the solicitor reviews through those amendments.
I'll entertain a motion for 5-minute recess. I don't want this to drag on.
As long as he's got enough time. it's fine
So
with me.
do we have a second for Councilman? Okay, Councilwoman Travis. So we'll be in recess for 5 minutes. Okay, we are back from recess here. We are going to just, I'm going to call on Councilman Ricks, and if you could have the solicitor go over exactly what is up here. Now, you're going to making an amendment to your amendment, if you will. So, Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. A couple of quick comments before the city council solicitor reads off the amendment as amended. I'll just say that I don't understand the separation of powers argument here because I don't know, maybe as a city council.
Councilman, if you could just make the amendment and then we will discuss that and then we can put it up for comments.
I'll just finish my sentence. I feel like if we're not willing to exercise legislative powers here, that I think we can all agree that the state legislature has. If Warwick does not have similar legislative powers, if we're willing to just abdicate those, as well as everything else, all of these other areas where we are confined by our city charter, I'm really not sure what we're doing here. Maybe
all right, thank you, Councilman. Do you have an amendment?
Any section at all. Maybe everything is executive powers.
Councilman, at this time, you have the floor to give an amendment. Do you have an amendment?
I do. City Council Solicitor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Councilman and members. It may be easier to withdraw the prior amendment and refresh this as a new amendment, if that is everyone's comfort level, and I can put it in play in the form that you now have ready to go.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no objection.
This way we can all understand exactly what we're discussing. Go ahead, Solicitor Walsh.
Thank you. So the prior amendment has been withdrawn by unanimous consent of the council, and Councilman Ricks now moves an amendment that has, I'll read the components, which were all inclusive of the prior amendment minus some items that were removed, and would, if Councilman Lattiser would like to, or is there a second to the new Ricks amendment? Okay. Thank you. So Councilman Ricks moves a new amendment, which would amend PCO 622 sub A by doing the following. On page 2, it would add language to subsection D that would make the first sentence read, data collected by an ALPR technology system shall not be sold or shared with any third-party individuals or entities, excluding law enforcement agencies. And this would be extended with the language that similarly have policies prohibiting the sale or sharing of any such data with any third-party individuals or entities, excluding law enforcement agencies with similar policies. It would also add a sentence at the end of subsection D that reads, in the event that any law enforcement agency does sell or share any such data in violation of this subsection, the department shall demand that such law enforcement agency delete any such data provided by the department, take all reasonably necessary measures to delete all such copies, and demand disgorgement of all proceeds of or flowing from any sale to be directed to the city. All copies of such data referred to in this subsection shall be deleted within 30 days, except pursuant to policies adopted in accordance with the provisions of this section. The next component of the amendment would be adding to section E 2 items at the end. The first being any instances of erroneous identification by the ALPR. And the other one being the location at which any stationary or fixed ALPR that is actively collecting data is installed and used. Furthermore, the amendment would add a new subsection F, which reads, a law enforcement officer shall be certified in ALPR operations by the department prior to operating or accessing ALPR data or ALPR technology systems. It would add another new subsection G, which reads, any data or other information created or collected in contravention of this chapter, and any data or information derived therefrom shall be immediately deleted and destroyed, and may not be offered as evidence by any municipal or state governmental entity in any civil or criminal action or proceeding, except as evidence of the violation of this chapter, semicolon, or be voluntarily provided to another person or entity for use as evidence or for any other purpose. However, notwithstanding the provisions of the subsection of this section, if upon the discovery of data or other information that was created or collected in contravention of this chapter, it appears such data or information may be material to the defense in a criminal prosecution, a copy of the relevant potentially material data or other information shall be turned over to the defendant before it is deleted and destroyed. Lastly, it adds one more subsection H, which reads, prior to any ALPR data being shared with any other law enforcement agency or any third party, such recipient shall provide a written affirmation that it shall use and dispose of any such ALPR data transmitted from the department in accordance with this subsection and department policies. That is the entirety of the new Rick's amendment.
Thank you, and that has been seconded by Councilman Lattiser. All right, are there any additional comments or questions from members who haven't had a chance to speak on this amendment yet? Okay, it's been moved in second. The clerk will call the roll on this amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley? No. Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 3 yes, 6 no, motion fails.
Thank you, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments or questions from members of the council? Councilman Gephardt.
I have 3 small items. The solicitor has them. The first, and just for clarity, we wrote this sub A, through a lot of conversation in our last meeting, through amendment, which is kind of a messy. And then we heard testimony tonight from several members of the public, as well as Senator Anderson, and through that and through reading the document that the ACLU rep had sent us, I thought that there were a few small tweaks that we could make to the work that we did the last time. So here they are. On page 2, line 13, after B6, to add a 7, which states, in a non-stationary application, such as being handheld or affixed to a motor vehicle for purposes of mobile surveillance. So that is essentially a 7th exclusion for use of the ALPR technology. The second is also on page 2, subsection E, and it adds a 7th item. And the 7th item is location of deployed ALPR cameras. That is another item to be added to the transparency portal. And the third item is also on page 2, subsection D, where it starts at line 14. And it's an additional sentence prior to the last sentence. So I'll pick up in the middle here. It says, therefore, ALPR data shall be purged unless it has become or is reasonable to believe it will become evidence in a criminal action. New sentence being added, any data downloaded or stored offline by the Warwick Police Department in excess of 30 days must be associated with an active or ongoing investigation, period, and then pick up the last sentence. So those are the three, based on the comments that were made earlier that I thought would address some of their points, and that is the amendment that I would like to make. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a second to the amendment? Second by Councilman Ricks. All right, any discussion or questions? Councilman Lattiser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Councilman, this, at the beginning of your comments, you said, we wrote this based upon comments, et cetera, that we've received at the last meeting, so forth and so on. What do you mean, we wrote this?
To the president. Well, there was a brief initial ordinance. I made, I don't know, several 5 or 6 amendments in our last council meeting, which we discussed, debated, and approved to become the sub A. And then the sub A is what we're looking at before us.
But this legislation was sponsored only by Councilman Sinapi, correct?
One need not sponsor a legislation to introduce an amendment.
No, I understand. But when you say we wrote this, that says something different.
I believe he's talking about at the council meeting, we made those amendments, we passed those amendments, and that's what we're working off. I believe that, is that the term that you're talking about in the full council
Okay.
meeting? We
Correct. Okay,
made some
thank
changes.
you for the clarification.
Is that it? Any other questions or comments on this? I do think there is some concerns about the giving out the exact location of the lights. I believe that's one of your amendments. I have spoken on that. That's a concern that the police department has, vandalism and issues like that. So that is something that I have spoken to the colonel about. So I do want to put that out there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's something that I have heard is a concern from the police department.
Okay.
Councilman Howe.
Just to address, I know one of the amendments calls for a purging of the data in 30 days. As we look at the flock camera policy approved by the public safety, if you look at section 8, paragraph C, it says flock safety will purge their data at the end of 30 days of storage. So that is identified in that. Did I misunderstand, Councilman? I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. President, I'm sorry.
Through the Council President. So there are two ways to view a video or a still that was captured by the system. One is going to be through the flock system, the cloud-based storage of all that data, which would be purged after a certain period of time. But there will be instances where that data is downloaded to add to a file, right? Because it becomes part of evidence, or it becomes so it's stored not in the cloud that becomes purged, but in a file on someone's computer or on the department shared drive or in whatever system they use. So I think so as to not subvert the 30-day limit, which I think we're all aligned on, by downloading either individually or in mass this data, being silent on sort of offline copies of what's been captured, I think would just be a deficiency in the the ordinance or the policy. So that's what I was attempting to cover with that brief sentence.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you,
Okay.
Councilman.
Any additional questions or comments? Councilman, I do, like I said, I do have a concern on that one particular comment. Councilman Ricks.
On that one particular item about identifying the location of the cameras, I'll just say that it's okay. So a lot of this data collection is premised on the idea that people have a limited right to privacy under the Fourth Amendment of the United States. Similarly, under Article 1, Section 6 of the Rhode Island Constitution, when it comes to being out in public. So I would look at that very same standard when it comes to the identification of the location of these different cameras. If the cameras have the ability to look at us, shouldn't we also have the ability to look at the cameras? If we are talking about Fourth Amendment concerns, or in Rhode Island, Article 1, Section 6 concerns when it comes to our state-protected and federally protected rights to privacy. Obviously, that's not where our rights to privacy end. That's only where they begin. I continue to have reservations about this sort of technology and potential abuse or misuse of it, but that's really those constitutionally protected areas that we can all agree on. That's the bare minimum. And so for those reasons, I see no issue with Councilman Gebhardt's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Ricks. Councilman Gebhardt.
For the reasons stated prior about the vandalism or potentially other issues, I'd be willing to remove the location from the transparency portal. I know I've seen in other municipalities that the location quickly gets out, so I have no fear that will become available, but it does not need to be included in the ordinance. So I'd be willing to strike that portion of the amendment. That would be number 7. Do you need you need more identification on that? I can give it to you.
Let's finish it up first. We have a councilman who'd like to comment first.
Thank you.
Yep. Councilman Lattiser.
So for what it's worth, I would be willing to support Councilman Gebhardt's, all of his amendments, as he initially stated. Just my 2 cents.
Solicitor Walsh, I believe the councilman was looking to make a change.
Thank you. Similarly, it's the cleanest way to do it would be unanimous consent to withdraw and reimpose the new amendment that I can read into the record.
You're opposed to that?
Not opposed.
Okay, all those in favor withdraw this, and then we will, the councilman will resubmit.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, go ahead.
All right, so new amendment is page 2, line 13. After B6, add a 7. In a non-stationary application, such as being handheld or affixed to a motor vehicle for purposes of mobile surveillance, period. And a second spot in subsection on page 2 in subsection D, after the sentence ending in evidence in a criminal action, a new sentence, any data downloaded or stored offline by the Warwick Police Department in excess of 30 days must be associated with an active or ongoing investigation period. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Discussion.
Sorry, there's a second. My mic wasn't on. Sorry. That was second by Councilman Ricks, Councilman Foley, and Councilman Howe. Are there any questions on the amendment? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action on the amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gebhardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes to amend.
Okay, the amendment has passed. Is there any other comments, questions, or amendments at this time the council would like to make? Okay, hearing none, Councilman Sinapi. He's moved favorable action as amended. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Howe. Councilwoman Travis. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, Councilman Lattiser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I will be voting no on this, and it's not because I disagree with all the work and time that Councilman Sinapi has put into this. It's because I think the amendments that Councilman Ricks made on this were prudent to the content. I don't think, in all the hard work that was put into this, I don't feel that it has gone far enough. And I also feel strongly that, as this council has spoken to in the past, that this is something that should be tabled until the General Assembly votes on it one way or another. We know that there was significant discussion in this past legislative session. We know that it's going to be reintroduced again, as Representative Solomon Jr. has stated to me. And for those reasons, I will be voting no on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Lattiser. Any additional comments or questions? Councilman Ricks.
Councilman Lattiser summed it up well. I think that we have made some good progress on this regulation. However, it does not go far enough, and for the same reasons as Councilman Lattiser, I will be joining him in voting no.
Thank you, Councilman Ricks. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action as amended.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 7 yes, 2 no. Amendment passes.
Thank you.
Favorable.
Amendment passes for first passage. Number 2 this evening is PCR 27-22, which is now 2022-333, Flock Automatic License Plate Readers, Committee Report Finance.
Hold till October 17th.
Hold till October 17th. Number 3 this evening is PCR 7722, which is now 2022-435, Committee Report Finance.
Hold October 17th.
Hold October 17th. Number 4 this evening is PCR 95-22, a resolution in regards to erecting stop signs. Committee Report Public Safety. For action, Councilwoman Travis, will you move that for me, please? Second by Councilman Lattiser, Councilman Howe, and Councilman Foley. Any questions or comments that were not asked earlier this evening in the Public Safety Committee? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We are now moving to new business. Number 1 is PCR 104-22, Committee Reports, Intergovernmental.
Favorable action, Mr. President.
For action, Councilman Sinapi. Second, he moves favorable action, second by Councilwoman Travis and Councilman Lattiser, Councilman Howe, Councilman McElroy, and Councilman Foley. Any questions or comments that were not asked earlier in the Intergovernmental Committee? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes, motion passes.
Motion passes. Thank you. We're now moving to unanimous consent. So we have 2 steps here. Is there any objections to hearing PCR 110-22, a resolution in regards to authorizing the mayor to enter into a telecommunications tower leases at Warwick Neck Water Tower, 915 Sandy Lane Tower and 99 Veterans Police Tower. So this is, any objections from members of the council to hear this at this time under unanimous consent? We're going to do a roll call on that. So a yes vote is to hear this under unanimous consent at this time.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes to hear the unanimous consent.
Okay, we can now hear PCR 110-22. Is there anyone from the administration to present?
It's not on, hold on there.
Thank you, Council President Dan Geegan. Again, similar to Clegg Field cell tower heard earlier tonight, we're seeking council consideration and authorization for a resolution to authorize the administration to enter into 3 lease renewals and 1 new lease. 2 of the leases will be at 99 Veterans, the police tower. 1 will be on the renewal of the lease at the Warwick Neck Water Tower. And then the 3rd lease is 915 Sandy Lane, which is the fire dispatch right near DPW. The leases that are to be renewed or proposed to be renewed were signed in the late 1990s. They were 25-year leases. They're coming up on expiration, so the tower companies are looking to renew them. And then Dish Wireless is starting a new network, a new wireless network, and they are seeking a spot on the police tower, and that we do have space there. Sprint PCS merged with T-Mobile, and through that spot became open in June. So there's room on that tower, and we're recommending or seeking consideration of this resolution for approval.
Thank you. So these are not new towers. They're not building new towers. These are existing towers that we're looking to renew leases.
That's correct. All of these are on existing sites.
And these leases were 25-year leases. So we're hoping if the council gives authorization to the mayor that we get a little bump from 25 years ago, maybe we get a little more coming in from those leases. I know we're just authorizing you to negotiate, but that's what I would hope to say.
That's correct. And we would probably seek a standardized annual lease escalator. Like it's fairly standard, set at 3%. Many of these leases some are high, some are low, but we have a pretty good handle on what the value is locally through some information we've obtained from other parties that have the leases in effect.
Excellent. And those every year it would move up with those escalators?
That's what we would recommend. That's correct. An annual escalator.
Excellent. Excellent. Any questions or comments? Councilman Ricks.
We had a similar situation in Ward 2 where you and the planning department were working on negotiation on the renewing the lease of a tower in Ward 2. I really appreciate back then you taking the time to walk me through the process, and I have full confidence in you and the city planning department in negotiating fair deals with these different third parties for these existing towers. It's really a win for everybody involved, including the residents and taxpayers here in the city of Warwick, and for the city of Warwick, making sure that the people are having a good cell phone reception. These are existing sites, so nobody is getting a new big tower built in their backyard, and bringing in revenue for the city of Warwick. Just wanted to express my full confidence in anticipation of granting authority to continue the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Ricks. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dan, as I understand it, the 3 larger players in that communication stuff, they already have spots on that tower or these towers, right?
That is correct.
So this is kind of like a bonus to us, right?
The proposed new lease, yes,
Right.
Yes.
And is there any reimbursement to the city in addition to the lease on those, or?
There's no cost to the city on any of these. The infrastructure is put there by the telecommunication companies. They are required to get building permits. They do pay, I believe they pay tangible taxes on the equipment.
Mhm.
So it's really just a plot of land, 50 by 50 is typical, that brings in a large amount of rent, but really they're paying for the space in the sky on the tower and the infrastructure.
On a per square foot basis, it's a huge win for the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the council? This was not heard in committee earlier this evening because it was under unanimous consent. So are there any members of the public that would like to speak on PCR 110-22? Any members of the public would like to speak on it? Any members of the public? Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion? Councilman Howe?
Move favorable action on PCR 11022.
Second by Councilman Ricks, Councilman Foley, Councilman McElroy, Councilman Lattiser. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? 9 yes, motion passes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you, Director. Ward 1, anything to docket under unanimous consent? Ward 2?
Pass.
Ward 3? Pass. Ward 4?
Pass.
Ward 5? Ward 6? Ward 7 passes. Ward 8? Ward 9? Anything to docket? No. Councilwoman Travis. All those in favor to move in the docket session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are now in the docket session. Ward 1, anything to docket?
Pass.
Ward 2?
Pass.
Ward 3? Pass. Ward 4?
Councilman McElroy, docket anything?
Ward 5? Ward 6? Ward 7 passes. Ward 8? Ward 9?
A resolution directing the Highway Division to enter into an easement agreement for the purposes of placing business signage.
Public properties. Anything else at docket, Councilman? All set. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.